Welcome to Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. I'm a board-certified music therapist, author, and expert on how to use music to relieve stress fast. This episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold is sponsored by Dr. Nisi, trainer and certifier of master and executive coaches, because she believes every person, every relationship, every business, and your finances should be extraordinary. Find out more about Dr. Nisi Moore and the Life Coaching Institute at www.drnisi.com. That's DRNEECIE.com. Hello and welcome to another episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. It's so great to be with you, and I'm so glad you're here. In this episode, I had the joy of interviewing a true ambassador of the power of music, Mr. Frank Fitzpatrick. Frank is a best-selling author, Grammy-nominated multi-platinum music producer, international keynote speaker, social entrepreneur, and wellness expert, redefining human potential through the convergence of health and wellness, music, creativity, and technology. He is a leading voice in the emerging hearables market and a contributing writer for Forbes and a faculty member at Singularity University's Exponential Medicine. He has created successful programs reaching over 200 million people and generating over $1 billion in revenues. Frank's mission is to amplify human potential at scale through the power of music, health, creativity, and technology. More about his best-selling book, Amplified, can be found at amplifiedbook.com. We talk about his journey, about how music forged a purpose in him in childhood that still drives him to this day. It's an inspiring story, so sit back, relax, and I'll see you on the other side. Frank Fitzpatrick, thank you so much for joining me on Reduce Your Stress.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Tim. I'm excited. Been looking forward to this for a while.
Yeah, as two busy guys in and out of studios, we have traded many emails along the way. And here we are. I'm really excited to introduce you to my community, because I know that anytime I meet someone who's active in this space that we're active in that I didn't know before, I'm just like, ooh, this is great. Like I joked before, a brother from another mother, someone else that we'll all enjoy with. So as I start out with all my guests, the first kind of question we always dive in is, let's start at the beginning, because everybody loves a good origin story. So where were you? Tell me where you were when you met music for the first time.
Well, I would have to say, met music was pretty young. So, I grew up in Detroit in the 60s and 70s. And so Detroit was at the time the center of Motown, soul music, R&B, one of the rock centers of the world for all the traveling bands to visit. And I had 5 older brothers, starting at 3 years older than I. So by the time I was, so when I was little, it was, it wasn't a house of musicians, but music was always a driver for me. Kind of an identity driver, how you try to assimilate to be like maybe your brothers, but you try to dissimulate to find your own path so that you can have your own music. So that, for me, it was, a little kid with, same age as Michael Jackson about, and the Jackson 5, and how a little kid could become, be singing Motown songs. And it's, and then all the way up through, by the time, I was 11, I was seeing, major concerts, because Detroit was full of them, from the Temptations one week to Stevie Wonder the next, to the Rolling Stones the next, to the Who, to, basic Pink Floyd, and, just kind of on a regular basis. By the time I was in high school, I had was working full time, and it was about half of that went towards records and to concert tickets. So the rest went towards saving for college. So it was, but early encounters, I wasn't trained or brought up as a musician. It wasn't part of the family architecture. I was mainly just a seriously avid fan, and Detroit was just a hotbed for some of the best popular music in the world at the time. So it was a great place to learn and be immersed in, and it very much so. Say, how did I meet music? And then there was a shift. So, around 2000, around 11, 12 years old, formation of identity years for those psychologists in the house, it's, so that's when Detroit collapsed. It was 1972. It went from the richest, most full employment city, highest paid middle class city of the world, the fourth richest city in America, to the 30% unemployment. It was, it was the Silicon Valley of America. It was the technology center of the world, to a complete crash and disruption with the departure of the auto industry, corrupt government, a lot of things we see, and first city to do forced desegregation, busing ahead of Boston, so that created 1 million people out of 4 to be white flight, basically, out of the city. So everything, schools all shut down. I was in the public school system. There was no school left. There was almost all this retail was boarded up, and there was, it was just complete, like COVID looked in its worst days.
Wow.
So that was a different shift for me, because then life didn't make a lot of sense, So and I spent a lot of time on the streets of Detroit, and fortunately, music became my drug of choice, because I had friends who were dying of heroin and were at 13 years old, and other ones who were, it was a messy place with a lot of stuff going on that didn't make any sense in the world. So then I tell this story, and I tell it. We'll talk about it later. I told it on a few TED Talks in my book, but it's laying on the floor, 11 years old, with on my parents' living room floor in the dark in the middle of the night, with the only pair of headphones and the only stereo in the house, on my ears, and Marvin Gaye, singing his new hit, What's Going On, into my earphones as the Vietnam War is tearing the world apart, and Detroit's going up in flames with riots, and I found no place to be a child. So music, I can honestly say, and I say it, and I am grateful as can be, that if I didn't have music, I wouldn't be alive today. There's just no possible way I would have made it off the streets,
Yeah, totally.
So, I know you do, it's funny, you talk about the arc. You asked me just about when I met music, but I kind of covered the arc of our conversation in that, what you told me before is we talk about kind of the beginnings, how we met music, and then we talk about, how that became a catalyst in our life for my career, which we can talk more if you want, and then how it came to be more than a career but purpose, right?
Yeah. So you're in high school, and
so my calling happened at 12 years old.
There you go.
I knew then that my mission, or what I didn't know it was a mission, but that what I wanted to do more than anything was create music to bring joy and stress relief and tools to survive the hardest times to kids all over the world. That was
brilliant.
From that day, that was like, okay, here we go. How do I do this?
Yeah. So that's a great question then. So you're 12, and you look out and how do I do this? Do I join a band? Do I work in a record store? Like, what are the first things that come to mind? Like, how do you enter the world of music? How do you begin that journey?
Yeah, so it was, I started like people to learn instruments, to try to get lessons.
What'd you start on?
Mainly dove into any kind of music I could immerse myself in, mostly live music. So this is like 11, 12 began, a weekly concert of a major legacy act. So by the time I was 18, I'd seen probably most legacy R&B, soul, and rock acts that you could probably think of. So that was really knowing that the first piece was just a self-knowing, is that I needed, if I was going to make it, I needed to fuel my soul in a different way than the world was fueling me, and I needed to tap into the only thing that I knew that was doing that, and that was music. So that was the first part of the path, is really finding that path. It took a while. I'd also kind of disband childhood. It didn't seem like a very useful things. I was working full time, going to school, doing all the things you're supposed to do to get attention and recognition, straight A's, class president, but none of it really filled anything. I finally, when I went away to college, I was pretty determined by that point that I was putting myself through college, and I was pretty determined on what I would do, what I wanted to do, at that point in a more practical career-wise. So I remember sitting on the side of my bed trying to decide, am I going to go into pre-med, med, am I going to go into, the only professions I grew up with in Detroit were, people who were successful were doctors, lawyers, or accountants, and other ones, the rest of us worked in the factory or as, or crafts, as kind of, electrician or whatever the case may be. So for me, it wasn't even there was no option. There was no example other than rock stars of what a music path meant. But that wasn't the path why I was seeking the path. So I got into college and I was in University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and they have one of the top music conservatories at the time and top business schools. And so, not classically trained, I had to figure out how to get myself into the music school, and then I had to figure out how to make a living at it, because I knew I had to make a living if I was going to do music. So I designed a program for the university. I went to the deans of the schools and designed a program to combine their first program, combining the business school and the music school, which they turned later into a master's program.
What?
And then I just did everything I could do to work in music at that point. So I was producing live shows and helping promote live shows, and a lot of that was more on the jazz side for like Miles Davis, Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, Ray Charles, Weather Report, all that kind of amazing Oscar Peterson jazz greats, so I got really exposed to a new world there, and played in bands, hosted a radio show, studied music, got a degree in composition and a degree in business, and just, did everything I could do to like learn all I could to enter the career. And I thought, maybe since it was what it was available to me, you learn as things show up in your life, what's the pathway. And the pathway I was learning was in live promotion, production, or radio, and live concerts didn't really feel like a path for me, because I felt it was too much effort to put into something that went away. I wanted to give people something they could hold on to, and to have something that would live on beyond the effort of the night. And so that's when I kind of shifted my model. I also decided at that time, because those artists that I mentioned had a habit of bringing together the best young musicians in the world, so that was kind of their thing. Miles was like, who's the best 22-year-old bass player in the world? Oh, Marcus Miller, let's get him in the band. Let's, asking Zawa now, who's the number one guy you've seen in Paris, and so all the way down to Sarah, Ella Fitzgerald, or Sarah Vaughan. They would have, who's like the stud young killer player that's going to be in my band. And these guys were incredible, it's like, so, and they became my friends, and I'm like, well, no matter how much I practice, I'm not going to be as good as one of these guys. And more importantly, though, it was at the peak of my career, at the peak of their career, these are the best players, bar none that we knew of. They, spent 300 nights in a hotel room, so that they could play for 45 minutes, and then fly and drive and take a bus to another city to sit around for 8 hours to play for another hour, and then and that was that was the lifestyle. So unfortunately in music and Hollywood and any kind of training that brings you in most careers, they don't teach you lifestyle of the lifestyle of the music therapist, lifestyle of the musician. That should be the first course you take, should be the lifestyle of in any career you go into. And so I decided, okay, I'm not going to be a player. That's not my course. And I looked at who was doing work in the world that I admired, and at the time Quincy was probably doing the most visibly humanitarian philanthropic work, combined with the highest level of cred and esteem and talent in his production and his the crossing between these different veins of music, business, performance, writing, composing. So I pursued two paths. One was, as a composer, was my degree, mainly because I would never become proficient enough to be a performer in an instrument by the standards at which I was there. And the second was, I really just decided, okay, I'm going to become a record producer and make music that makes millions of people have more joy and resilience in their life.
Got that.
Did that and moved to Hollywood and continued that path for a long time. Yeah.
Got it. So how old are you when you make the move to Hollywood?
I just graduated, so whatever that was, 22 or something like that. And straight out of college, I was offered a job here at the time by a producer named Richard Perry, who was the top pop producer in the 80s. So I came out to work on records like the Pointer Sisters, Breakout LP, and Julio Iglesias, Willie Nelson, Diana Ross, that kind of stuff. So it was straight into the I used to say straight out of the musician camp, straight into the pop microwave. but no, it was very talented. So so that was my path, and then that shifted its own course, because at a certain point, probably within a few years, I realized I had to go through another healing because I had scoliosis and I was in a lot of pain all the time in my back. And but aside from that, I didn't grow up a movie guy, like a lot of people grow up on movies and theaters, and I grew up more just on the music was the thing, So, but then I started to get into films a little bit more. It was the heyday of what we call the San Francisco directors with Coppola and Oliver Stone and De Palma and all, So, and I was watching, I sat and watched Platoon when it first came out, and suddenly I just had this aha moment of, of all the things I can do to help people transform their life through music, if I can combine music and great storytelling and great imagery and really powerful emotional catharsis, I can reach and help a lot more people. So then I kind of shifted from records only into the film composing, doing soundtracks, that whole work, and then that composer for that film, a brilliant, amazing human being who's passed now, is Georges Delerue. It kind of became one of my mentors, and I worked for him for several years and learned the studio system and recorded all over the world with different symphonies, and did a lot of films, and then moved into my own composing and producing career for soundtracks and more records and more artists. So.
Awesome. So now you're kind of combining media, like there's the visual impact of the storytelling along with the power and the emotional, evocative power of music together. And are you starting to see, like, did you have this moment where you were like, I'm kind of delivering on what I wanted to do, or were you still hungry? Like, I'm not quite there yet. You know what I'm saying? Like, So it was mixed. I mean, it's a good question. So yeah, there was the aha moment of, which I've kind of held on to. I rarely do music as a standalone. It's always kind of an integrated modality into multi-stacking experiences, conscious and subconscious, or multi-neural experiences if you're talking about music therapy more, or But what was interesting to me, because I was the scoliosis bit that I slipped on there a minute ago led to me going into yoga and studying yoga, and yoga took me into studying ancient wisdom and the Vedas, and it was really interesting to me at the time that I saw through the film, like, the combination of visualization, music, and story and characters, these kind of four elements that make up great transformational stories. Catharsis was the same practice we've been doing for thousands and thousands of years in a deep meditation. So, visualizing, sound, music, all these different elements are brought together to create a much more integrated whole experience than any one of them on their own. And so that was a pretty interesting piece to me in terms of fulfillment of, had I found it. I had found a big piece, I learned a lot. And then, what happened for me is then Hollywood's is a pretty, it's a jungle. So it's just so I was making my way through the jungle for many years, and I had many blessed and successful and highlights and downsides and whatever it be. It's quite a roller coaster. And then so I had found it, but I lost it a little bit, because here you are working 100 hours a week in an industry that's
trying, that kicks your ass, even when you're doing well, and not that everybody shouldn't go into it. I'm just, but and so I realized, I woke up one day, later, in a yoga class probably, or in a yoga practice, and it was like, okay, why am I doing this? So here comes another offer for a film, and and I had a lot of, some pretty successful soundtracks, but if you asked me to do those soundtracks today, or 10 years later, I wouldn't do them because of the message that they were putting out in the world, or the film, so I had crossed into the survival line against the kind of, I wouldn't say the integrity of my soul. It was all, they were good people, good intentions. It just wasn't as specifically what I was put on this planet to do, and the message that I was here to bring, and time was getting shorter for me to make that message clear and direct.
Gotcha. Yeah. Was it the scoliosis that kind of reminded you of that? Like, oh, I'm mortal, or was there some other kind of wake up call? I know I had a wake up call in my life like that, so I'm curious if you had one.
Yeah, well, the scoliosis was a blessing. I always call them curses disguised, blessings disguised as curses.
Right,
so
right.
Because that took me into the path of yoga and meditation, and ancient wisdom studies and healing arts, and so I would have never. So that was a different kind of wake-up call, a consciousness to get into my own consciousness deeper, and to do it physiologically as well as psychologically. So that was a different kind of wake-up call. The wake-up call around, how to get clearer in executing and clearer on my purpose was, in waves. It's like, we say one mission, a thousand heroes' journeys, right?
Totally.
So, each one you go out, you got it clear, you get beat up, you bring a little bit back, you go and you start over again, and you go, okay, now that was the wrong mountain, let me try this mountain. It's like, I know there's something on the other side there. So so it was kind of, it's been, I've been in the business, side, and making music professionally, and doing that side of things for 40 years. So, it's been a bit of an arc, and that was, and 12 came a lot earlier than that. So, but, so I don't know, exactly what the wake up call. Part of it was, I think it's just the closer I get to the essence of who I am, and in those moments, like in a deep meditation, or maybe in a yoga flow, or maybe on a retreat, or maybe in whatever be the case, where I start, things get quiet enough and I can listen to why I'm here, and then why I'm not supposed to be doing this, or that. Neti, we say in Sanskrit, not this, not that. So, we strip away the layers,
Yes.
It's not that, we don't,
Just
it's not that
peel the onion.
add on the layers. Hopefully we kind of continue to strip them away so we can see more clearly. And I just, it was just like, okay, it was really exciting to make those hit records and those hit soundtracks, but if I stand back and I go, why am I here? What am I here to do that other people haven't been gifted the same set of gifts that I can bring to that? What do I embody my soul every, into this body and this experience, this physical life every morning to do? Then I have to say, well, no, that's not my name. That's not what I'm here for. So, that was an interesting test because it, cut out about 80% of my work in Hollywood. So, and when you start saying no, people, it doesn't always bode well, but, it's just, we got to figure out which master are we serving.
Well said. Yeah, I joke with people. I'm like, listen, there's this voice inside of my head. Like, I have to take every call from the voice inside of my head. I can't let it go to voicemail. I have to hear it. It's the only voice I cannot avoid. And then that look back from the partner that's in the mirror. Every time I look at that person, I got to be accountable to that person too. And those are the two masters that I've figured out that I really need to serve first and foremost, because they're relentless. If I try to like blow them off, it never goes well.
Right. So what's the biggest, I'm going to ask you a question now. So what's the biggest call that you resisted?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I think for me, it's been there have been times where the ego, let's just say it's the ego is always involved in the moments of resistance. The ego really wants to still be the talent on stage.
Right.
That's very, very central to me. I was on stage at 4, I was a soloist by 4. I mean, it's just like so drilled in,
Right.
and so, stepping away from and letting go of that the push energy, like, oh, I'm going to make this happen. Oftentimes that, my ego was at the source of what it was, whether it was staying in a band too long, whether it was trying to, try this business too long. It's usually I'm trying to do something too long. It's not because I cut too soon. It's because I didn't cut soon enough. And that's been part of the having the courage to say no, to that, and that it's going to be okay. Because my ego is like, it's like survival. If I'm afraid if I say no to my ego, I'm going to die. That's what that's what it feels like. I know it's not true, but that's the conversation in the committee between the voice in the head and the guy in the mirror. So it's gotten challenging, or it's been challenging before. So can you relate to that?
Absolutely. Daily.
Yeah. And I love how you said netty. Was that the phrase? Yeah. Because I think people forget, like, in order to say yes to something new, you have to start saying no to something old.
Right.
And that's the only way you create space for something new. And a lot of then it takes courage to say no. It's just easier to keep saying yes. It's not that it's not hard to say no. It's just easier to say yes. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Just one more, whatever that just one more is.
Right.
So you started a program, called Why Music. And there's this website, Earth Tones. And there's a very conscious effort on your part now, as evidenced by Why Music campaign and Earth Tones, to actualize more of what you've been kind of setting up through telling this story. So tell me about kind of like the origin of when that actually happened. You started saying no to projects in Hollywood that didn't align with you, but then you were like, and now I'm going to do this.
Well, let me just first, by forewarning the audience, don't try this at home. Don't go out and start a nonprofit.
This is a cautionary tale.
Nonprofit. With all the work of a prophet. But if not more. But anyways, that kidding aside, it was the same time, really. When I dove back into that work, and I'm not committed to this, right? I'm not committed to putting something out in the world that doesn't speak to the message of which I'm here to bring. I am committed to doing projects and films and records that bring the message of and the tools of what I'm here to bring. And then, so what am I committed to? Well, I'm committed to what that 12-year-old kid said, It's like, okay, so how do I do that, And I've just spent, 25 years studying, like, how we transform the thoughts, beliefs, and perceptions of millions and millions and millions of people at the turn of a switch within a minute. It's like, how do I use those skills towards that goal? Why did my soul need to have that, go through that fire, and what did it get molded to do? So it's Earth Tones kind of started more with, I would choose projects that were aligned with what I would do in Hollywood that were meaningful to me, and then I would leverage those projects into social impact. So, for example, if I had a film that was a story of, Forrest Whitaker and Miramax, and it was Hurricane Katrina and blah, 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 then I'd use the nonprofit and partner with an organization like Brad Pitt to build homes off, release a single with a couple of artists, bring awareness, have that be the single for the film, kind of bring these worlds together. Everything from that to helping people more on the leadership side, like later what happened with, like, working with, like, Pope Francis and, on his slavery campaign and stuff, how to use those powers of how we can change the perception of a group of people into a more positive, heart-centered space without them knowing it's taking place. And that's what I call the Shakespeare technique. So it's,
yes. Some
So I
stealth transformation right there.
yeah, so
Very
that's
nice.
how it kind of began. And then the Why Music campaign, I was having a lot of challenges with the nonprofit because it's a nonprofit, and I wasn't, making the money from Hollywood anymore. So I was actually spending it on trying to save the world. Again, what I call premature philanthropist. Something you should try at home. And so so then I said, okay, I want to do something. I got to kind of in a more specific, give people the tools. Not just leaders and these events. But what can I do more specifically that's more tied to that original purpose? And it was all tied to the purpose. But and at the time, it was a lot of things came together at the same time. This was around 2010, 11, 12 in this period, and I was already working as a social entrepreneur and traveling around and giving talks and doing live presentations on the power of music and storytelling throughout the world and how we can use it for social good and how blah 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 blah, and whether it's in education, health, social impact, and so then at the time, I had hooked up and did my first program at Singularity University, which I'm now in the Faculty of Exponential Medicine in Singularity University, and that was 10 years ago. It all kind of happened around the same time. And in my travels in kind of the social entrepreneurial impact space, I would do events like the Skull World Forum for social entrepreneurs at Oxford and different international events and TED stuff and different stuff like that. So it brought me into these circles of people. And Ariana had started Huffington Post, and she's asked if I would do a column on either music or yoga or both, and I chose music, and Simon Sinek had just done the why. So I thought, people got to know why music. They got it all basically mixed up. It's just, why is music so powerful? Why is music so important in our lives? Why is it what is it beyond entertainment, as you talk about, and and where we resonate. So then I started launched or started a series on Huffington Post called the Why Music. I did all at the same time. I started something in the labs at Singularity University to try to start to bring technology into this play. And I did a couple of TEDx talks, and one was, and then I did a program down in Brazil to try to bring music with the government and one of the leading publishers there to try to bring music and technology together for the first ever, believe it or not, in Brazil, music education curriculum in the elementary schools that they'd ever had. And so all these things kind of came together at the same time. This became the Why Music campaign, Porque Musica in Brazil and Latin America. And then I just continued kind of on this bandwagon in a number of modalities, and that became the focus of the work at Earth Tones, which is, as I've said several times, a nonprofit, but so donate here. So feel free. So, just kidding.
No, not kidding. Earthtones.org, ladies and gentlemen. I will have that link in the show notes. So, all kidding aside, nonprofits do phenomenal work in the world, and they really do need someone to cut them a check, right? Because they've got the plan, they've got the people, they just need the funding. So if you have the funding and you don't want to put in your sweat equity and your time, and someone else already has solved the puzzle, they just need someone to cut a check. It's incredibly rewarding to literally be the person who cuts a check, right, and makes it happen. I've been the person asking for the check before, and I've been the person who's cut the check. And I can tell you it is deeply gratifying to just be able to cut a check and make someone else's dreams about helping others just happen. So, please go to earthtones.org and find out more about it. So then we get to where we met, which was we're in this men's group, and someone says, "Hey, Frank's got this new book coming out called Amplified. Hey, come check it out. And, if you can help him, it's going to be released." And, "Oh, what's Amplified? What's this? Who's Frank?" And that was my, introduction to you, was through your new book. And that's when I was like, what? Oh my gosh, how do we not know each other? And so problem solved. Now we know each other. But why the book instead of why music? Let's say, suddenly you find yourself, I'm going to write a book. That's my next, my next expression. How did that come about? Because for those who have not written the book, for guys, it's the closest thing to giving birth. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I don't know. Trying to make a movie. That's like twins.
I was going to say that's like twins or triplets or something. I wouldn't even go there myself.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So, but well, I'll step back because of where we met. So, yeah, with this in the group, Ken Rukowski's metal group, where we met. So, at that time, so I had another, aha moment, which is usually when you get your legs cut off at the knees and you have to learn to walk again. So it's and this was about, I was traveling all over the world. This pre-story. I'm going to come to the book, but and I was traveling around and I was playing premature philanthropist and losing every penny I ever saved and then some, and then having the most phenomenal experiences with some of the most brilliant, incredible leaders and people and cultures, and so it was no regrets. And so I kind of, one of the things when I left Hollywood to do the social entrepreneur route, I was pretty burned out because I'd worked a lot of all-nighters, multiple nights in a row, and for years in a row, and it's just it's not a consciously, it's not a place for well-being. Let's just say that. So what your show is about. So then, but I took that same, A-type personality, the one that had me design my own degrees, the one that had me working through high school, the one that had me, it's like and I took it into this save the world space, and that became, I was flying flights to China, to Sao Paulo, to the UK, and back again, and getting up after 4 hours of sleep, running to the nearest temple to meditate, and then going into these crazy meetings that were, but, and I burned out. And at the time that I burned out, because I had been, already 25, 30 years a yogi and had all these, what we call siddhis, which are these kind of elevated practices, so that I could do those ridiculous things and then kind of come back to presence. but they were Band-Aids, I didn't realize how much they were Band-Aids. So by the time I really hit bottom, I had completely depleted every part of my adrenal system. I was gone, So then I had done all these trainings we do in the healing arts, and emotional intelligence training. Gave the first emotional intelligence trainings with one of my mentors in the 80s to the leadership at Dentsu in Japan. I mean, broke a lot of trends, and then yoga and meditation and pranayama and all these different practices that I got to be pretty good at. And but I burned out hard. It took me, 2 years to rebuild my adrenal system. Couldn't get out of bed, complete brain fog, couldn't really function. It got a little scary. So it's, so I decided, there are people in the world who are doing the things that I aspire to be doing, who are not burning out, or at least, at least they don't show it. So what are they doing? So I really got about 4 years ago, a couple of years before COVID, into, okay, what is the high performance space? Like, what is this whole thing, high performance, peak performance, And I bring this in to the metal group just because there's a bit of this, there's a number of people in the space there. And so I started to take the trainings, do, from Brendan Burchard's to Optimize, to, all these, to studying Kotler's work, to all this kind of like, what is it that is going on that their nervous systems can handle that level of intensity? How are they continuing to thrive in multiple areas of their life and doing that? So that was my path of, to learn a new set of tools other than what I had learned, these great practices out of yoga and meditation and kind of the healing arts space, to really, if I wanted to play pro ball, and be on the court with LeBron James, I better figure out what the hell he's doing, So in the world, as metaphorically. So that became a big shift for me, into stepping into the next place. And then the book, to be honest, has been written over a course of about 10 years, because it started kind of with the writing of the the column and then the writing of, so that studies and the research have really been done deeply over the course of 10 years, probably more intensely over the last 4 or 5, and then seriously more intensely over leading up to COVID. So when the COVID came, the funding for the nonprofit again went up in flames, and a lot of other things, just like for many people, and so I needed, I'm still on the calling. It's like, okay, how do I, I'm not leaving this planet till I get this into these tool sets and this kind of new way to relate to and to practically use music to thrive and survive in a world that's sometimes spins faster than we're able to keep our balance in, and so how do I do that, and I had to create materials that I could disseminate at a much higher level, and so the book kind of became that. The book became that as kind of okay, what's the culmination of the learning of the last 4 years? What's the culmination of the research of the last 10 years? How do I flip this into something that's anybody can put in their hands, and I can guarantee them that they can improve areas of their life, be it their relationships, their health, their productivity, so and not have to fly around to China, to Sao Paulo, to tell people all the time the same story. So that's a little, that's how the book came about. Amplified is the title of the book, and it's Unleash Your Potential Through the Power of Music, which is specifically what it's about, and how to do that. And but it was the Why Music book. So now you see the continuum.
Yes.
The Why Music book wasn't such a great title, and it wasn't forward thinking for me at this point. And Amplified I have a number of things in crossover the music and technology and health and human potential sphere, of which this ties into, that are forward facing and what are really driving me and getting me out of bed and really exciting at this point.
Got it. Yeah, no, amplify is a great verb. Great, just so much energy behind that I completely resonate with. And I love that in the book, you're talking so many ways, like, even if you just want to look at it chronologically from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, in terms of how to reach for music, how to use music in different ways to optimize your experience. And also for someone who's a non-musician,
right,
which I think is one of the biggest roadblocks to people when they start talking about music, is they have this myth that there's like the gods decreed that a select few of us have this magical power, that this separate gene that doesn't exist, right? And the rest are just relegated to the spectator, and really empowering people to reach for it, like as a part of your practice, as a part of your day, is what resonates so much with me. And that, when you said the COVID thing, like, how do I keep delivering even in the midst of COVID? Like, this podcast,
right,
was a response to how do I support my fellow healthcare workers in COVID remotely, and game on. Right now, $0 made, right? Of course, because that's, sometimes that's not the first thing you're trying to accomplish in this particular journey that we're on, but having the impact where people can reach for music in their day, and it optimizes their performance. That's why I was like, we have to chat. So what was, in delivering the book, have you had any kind of pleasant surprises with resonance, reaction, now that the book's been out a couple months? What are you surprised and delighted with along the journey? Because I know there's a lot of effort that goes into the publishing process, and it can turn into a chore, and I never want to see the book again.
Yeah, they don't let you happen. A couple of things. One thing I just wanted to say, I've talked a little bit about joked about the nonprofit and stuff, but I live and have lived a very, very rich life, and as have you, and I believe that we grow rich by the enrichment we bring into other people's lives, and so that's one thing. Just before I jump in to answer your question, and then the other piece is, I think that one of the biggest things, if there's something I'm here to heal with music that might be different than a traditional music therapist or something. It's to heal our relationship with music. Societally and individually, we have a very dysfunctional relationship with music that cuts us off from it as a resource to thrive in our lives. And it's very deeply embedded. In fact, when I did my first talk at NASA and Singularity University, and it was at the time, this is 2012, and I was looking, that's when all the music got pulled out of schools, and people like Bill Gates and Jeff Skoll, who are doing wonderful philanthropic work in the world, wouldn't support music programs. The state of California took all their funding out of music arts funding, and so, and in the health space, as you know, you're a music therapist or anybody else, it was just relegated to, the least. So I just, I had to go back 500 years, so I just wasn't pissed off at everybody. I was just like, I had to go back like 500 years back to the, when we started to commercialize music and when we narrowed its view down to what I call, basically two lenses, which is commodity and performance, and where we separated the listener, the audience, from the performer, and then where we started to sell it as a commodity. And that's been put into our genetic code at this point. It's not really in our genetic code. Music is an organic, resources in our code, but in our programming, the software that we've been given, it's much different. And so even today, if you're going to go to any kind of music school other than probably to be a music therapist, you're going to learn about performance, right? And if you don't succeed at what performance is, meaning becoming, one of those rock stars of the first chair violin and X, or getting on the stage and having, your ego fed like it demands, then suddenly there's something like you're less than, and that's bullshit, because music has no judgment. And music's, as I say in the book, it's, music is a form of higher intelligence, whether it's Howard Gardner or it's Beethoven or it's Plato, whoever's saying it. So it's like a divine spirit that actually, it unconditionally cares for us. It's in our pattern of our DNA, and it's available to us at any time for any cause we need, especially today when you have 30 million songs on your phone at a touch. And all you really need is some awareness of some self-awareness of what's happened to you in the processing of this programming, some tools on how to reverse it, and some tools on how to use that incredible resource in really practical ways, whether it's to make you, have an awesome morning, make you have an awesome relationship with your parents or your kids, to make you, there isn't any area that pre 500 years ago music wasn't used for in society or tribe, and there isn't any area you can't use it personally in your life. So I jump back to that. Sorry to, I'm not trying to avoid your question, but to get back and say, if there's one area that I hope the book will help people do is, transform the way they relate to and understand and use music in their lives in a practical daily, way to really thrive. And I know it's possible. And so, back to your question, any, I think it was moments that kind of surprised me since the release. It's been out, I think, 6 weeks, but well, there's one that I'm really excited about. So this is an ego play, obviously, because we did the bestsellers on Amazon, for whatever that means, and there's like 5 categories we hit, but there's a couple that were really exciting to me, and I think personally. So one was we hit number 1 in the psychology of creativity and genius.
Wow, I didn't even know that was a category.
Awesome. I said, that's the name of my next book. I said, thank you for that. I don't care if it was just for an hour or one day or whatever. It's like, but the other one we hit holistic health, holistic and alternative medicine.
Nice.
For a music book, it's not a music therapy book. It's not a textbook.
Right.
It is, for those who are listening, it is, thoroughly vetted by leading neuroscientists, and there isn't, I hope that, I'm sure there's some research that's off and someone will challenge me on, but it's been thoroughly vetted by, it's really important to me that it stands in integrity, but it's also really important to me that it communicates to the largest number of people possible and doesn't get relegated as a textbook, you know.
No, you did a great job of that because it's written for the, the layman, but it's like I read the reference section because I'm a nerd and I have one in my book, right? And I'm like, oh, that's a great study. And oh, yes, I love that author. And oh, that book right there and that study. So I can personally vouch for.
Now it's vetted by one more brilliant.
It's been vetted. Yeah, totally. And you do a really good job of translating it into English. That's the thing that is the dilemma of the expert who's trying to, convey something. It gets jargony, and your book's incredibly inclusive and empowering to the person to be like, oh, I'm going to give this a whirl. This makes sense to me. This is written in language this is the language I speak. This is the language I think. This is the language I feel. And so, yeah, me and music, we are really tight. He's right. I'm going to go use it in X+1 ways now. So,
right.
Well done.
That's my goal. I've had some, other things that have been surprising is, just the comments, the people on, the reviews and the comments of people that are just, that are immediately responding to it. So that's really that's beautiful. And then I think the other one story, if there's people in the book path, interested in the book path, because a lot of people are, but so I just recorded the audiobook last week, and so that'll be out December 15th. We're doing another run and bring the audiobook out, which
Awesome.
is important to me because I am in the audio space. So I write at the intersection of human potential and music and sound and technology, and I write for Forbes on the subject and blah, 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 a regular column in all of these areas. So it's so doing an audiobook was I'm basically, we're committed to disrupting the audiobook world because it's still kind of where the music production book, was, 10 years ago, if not 1950. So, and so trying to find a way to do that, and that's been a new fun and challenge, and then I was going to record myself. We were voting back and forth. Should Frank record? Should we get a narrator, author, actor, or whatever? And I was all set to go in Monday of last week. I'm trying, and then I just thought about it. I said, who reads my favorite books? And I went back and looked, and I found this guy who I love, Fred Sanders, who's an amazing actor, an amazing narrator, and he's done Adam Grant's works and Stephen Kotler's work, and he's so he's right in the kind of vertical of the space I want to be speaking in, and I realized as much as I'm happy to run a marathon, it's like I love to put myself on the challenges. I have a lot of things going on, and if I could have somebody I know is going to do a lot better, and it was actually going to be a lot more affordable to do than me 3 times as many hours in the studio. So Fred, managed to get a hold of Fred, and Fred is also a musician and also has a band and makes records and
No way.
many movies, and he Daniel Levitin narrated, I believe, his own books. Daniel Levitin writes the foreword. This Is Your Brain on Music is one of his most famous books, and he directed Daniel and his books.
Interesting. How about that?
So he was like, we just had a great time. It was just a beautiful connection, and
Meant to be.
And I did what I do much better is I'm much better on the other side of the glass as a producer and writer than trying to play the artist.
So that's kind of a cool experience right there. Talk about full circle, like you producing your own book.
Right.
The culmination of this kid lying on his back with headphones listening to Marvin Gaye, What's Going On? Well, here's what's going on. This many years later, you are living the vision and making it real in the world and blessing others in the process. So Frank Fitzpatrick, kudos to you, my friend. And I just want to thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thanks, man. It's been awesome. Yeah. And people can get to the book if they are interested at amplifiedbook.com. Pretty easy. For those who are listening and don't see the notes, but amplifiedbook.com.
Yes, thank you for that.
Hopefully it'll serve you and those you love, and that's the intention, and that's the calling that won't let go.
Well, who needs it to let go when it's producing all this great fruit? So keep more will be revealed. So stay tuned. Thanks again, Frank.
All right, buddy. Great to see you. Appreciate it very much, Tim. Keep doing the great work on your podcast.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks so much for checking out this episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. I've got a couple of resources for you, which you can find in the show notes or you can listen to right here. So check it out. If you enjoy the sound of my voice and you enjoy the sound of my guitar, imagine them put together. Go to sonicrecovery.com and take your very own relaxation vacation, where I take you out of the stress of the present moment and back in time to a time when you felt happy, healthy, safe, and sober, and then walk you through that memory so you can bring back those feelings into the challenges you're facing today. So go check that out. It's at sonicrecovery.com. If you're a healthcare worker in recovery, check out the Music in Recovery Self-Care Guide for Healthcare Professionals that I created just for you. That's at hcp.sonicrecovery.com. And if you're a healthcare worker and you'd like more information about how to help your patients use music, you can check out the Music Medicine Guide that I created just for you at musicmedicineguide.com. Lastly, if you enjoyed the pod and you haven't done it yet, would you just take a minute to rate and review it? It really only takes about 60 seconds, believe it or not, and it would go a long way to help us make more people know just how good this pod is, particularly for healthcare workers and their stress. Thanks again. See you next time.